Elkhart, Indiana, home to one of the largest Norfolk Southern yards. We're at this Elkhart station, across from the National New York Central Railroad Museum. You can see the museum has a wide range of different kinds of rolling stock. You can see two Milwaukee Road reefers, Conrail caboose, a New York Central wood caboose, an E8 way back there, and 3001, soon to be restored to operating condition. You can also see a hopper and a tank car. To start the trains off for tonight, we see a intermodal being led by a Norfolk Southern Ace, a Norfolk Southern SD70 ACC, along with an AC44 C6M. This train is heading towards Chicago. I'm not sure exactly where though. Now with that train done, let's look at the museum a little more. Here you can see the Woodside caboose along with a Conrail transfer caboose. That caboose actually is a part of the crane that is at the museum. You can also see 3001 there, which is recently bought by Fort Wayne to be restored and run on the main line, as the kids say nowadays. Now you also could see two Milwaukee Road Express reefers, along with some sort of hopper, a red caboose, and a New York Central light blue caboose. That is a unique car, and honestly I've never seen anything with that short of cupola before. You can also see the E8A, which the museum lets you go inside and blow the horn even. Here comes the next train. Well, not right away. This train would end up stopping for around 15 minutes or so. I have no idea why, because nothing else passed during this time. Well, you'll see what power it has later, because honestly, it is pretty interesting. This intermodal train was a little bit different than the first one. The first one mainly was carrying JB Hunt and Hub Group containers. However, this one had a lot of Ocean Network Express containers. Amongst other brands of containers, which I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. However, this train was also being led by 100% BNSF power. So my guess is that this came off the BNSF and onto the Norfolk Southern. There's also a DPU. The lead engine was an ES44C4, and the DPU was an aging C449W. After that DPU passed, I was hearing something else coming from the other direction, which we will see here very shortly. Thankfully, it would not pass this train, as it was on the very farthest track from the station and closest to the museum. After that train would come, we would see a slow-moving manifest heading into Elkhart Yard with standard Norfolk Southern power. This train was led by an ace with, I'm pretty sure, K5LA, which I've never seen before. The Gevo, of course, was one of the AC ones, one of the earlier ones, and really wasn't anything too interesting. I think the most interesting part of the train are the cars, because a little bit later, we would see a Norfolk and Western hopper amongst a newer Canadian Pacific hopper. This train will also have a DPU, which we'll see a little later. After this hopper passed, I would head back to the car to warm up a little bit. However, making it around halfway back to the car, we would see another train coming around the bend. This train was led by a Norfolk Southern ES44 AC, along with a Canadian Pacific AC44. I have no idea what this train is carrying, but it was entirely made up of these 2-bay hoppers. Notice the train slowing down. At this moment, I had no clue, but there would be another train on its way coming through. However, thankfully, this one did not block it, and at almost the exact moment the train ended, we would see a BNSF Heritage 2-9 rolling around behind the train with an awesome tuned horn. If the other train hadn't gone through, I don't know if what I would have done. If I would have left, I have no clue. Honestly, this had to have been one of the best tuned horns we would see all of the 3 days that we were there. But for whatever reason, Norfolk Southern horns are very out of tune, as you'll see later on some of the AC44 C6Ms. This is almost a reverse consist of that intermodal with the BNSF power earlier. A -9 leading and a GEVO BNSF trail DPU. However, this time it was not mid-train, it was end of train. Also note the green hoppers that just went by in the background. this would not be the last instance of a three-way meet tonight, as this is only the first of two. Also note, this is my very first three-way meet ever that I've ever caught. Here comes the DPU of that manifest that was out front. And not too long after, we would see the DPU of that first train that came. The DPU on this was a mid-train DPU, and it was just an AC-44 C6M. Now on to the next day, where the main focus today was catching two things: Amtrak and B-23, a local which you'll see later. The very first train being led by an AC-44 C6M and a Gevo. I believe the symbol on this train was 310, but I'm not too sure. Here comes the next train, an intermodal being led by a SD70 ACC. This is the second SD70 ACC that I've ever seen leading, and the fourth total. Following the ACC would be another AC-44 C6M. I believe this is Norfolk Southern 310 because they typically carry those large 86/89 foot boxcars. We would see 309 later with even more of those cars. Quick note, notice how both these trains are not occupying that third track. Typically, Norfolk Southern in this area runs on that farthest back track and the closest track. That is because Amtrak is only around 5 minutes out. After not too long, we would then see the end of that intermodal, while the train I believe to be 310 is still heading on into that route. It would not be long after the other train would finally end. And then, only around 5 to 10 minutes later, we would then see Amtrak number 40, the Floridian, heading to Chicago. Today on the consist was a P-42 DC and an ALC-42. I've never seen one of those before, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Nearly a minute after they got into the station, I would hear another train sneaking up on the other side. This train would be led by a C449W, and I believe what is the whiteface paint scheme. Of course, after this train was leaving. So, I wasn't on the platform, so I quickly ran down to the crossing to catch them. I'm not exactly sure if this is a whiteface -9. However, it looks like it, so I'm pretty sure it is. The paint has kind of faded a little bit, so I honestly have no clue. Of course, right behind the -9 was what the -9 will be most likely in around 3 to 4 months. An AC-44 C6M. I'm kind of sad that the old -9s are getting rebuilt into AC-44 C6Ms. On this train here, behind this train here, we see a very hard-working pair of locomotives. One of them being an AC-44 C6M, the other one being an SC-10D Ace. Once again, making a three-way meet, if you count Amtrak earlier. I believe this train that's coming right now is 309, the one behind the grain train. Because, a little later, you'll begin to see some of those massive 86-footers again. This train had most railroads that had those large boxcars, including but not limited to Norfolk Southern, CN, Illinois Central Gulf, CSX, and Grand Trunk. You can see some of them right there. There's a Norfolk Southern one. Another Norfolk Southern one. And I believe somewhere around here is the CSX and Grand Trunk one. There's the CSX one. I believe that is the Illinois Central Gulf one. There's the Grand Trunk. Oh, there's the XCG one. And I believe the Grand Trunk one passed a little bit earlier. Thankfully, we will see one of these 86-footers in full order. This one being a CSX one, along with a few of the standard brown Norfolk Southern and CN ones. Up until this point, I've never seen a CSX 86/89 footer. Honestly, I think they're a little less boring than the brown ones that are most of them. Now that we're in the light, we get to look at this, an old Norfolk Southern crane. I'm pretty sure this was built in Ohio, or stationed originally in Ohio, because there's Ohio tags all over that thing. Now you can see kind of the rest of this museum on the other end, along with the eastbound direction, heading toward Pennsylvania, Ohio. And that is the direction toward Chicago. This Chicago-bound coal train, which isn't actually heading toward Chicago, this train is actually heading to around Gary, Indiana. Go to the northern Indiana company that will unload them and turn them into power or ships. This one would also have a DPU, and this DPU would be a little bit different than the rest we've seen, because it was actually the only Union Pacific engine we would see today, and for the rest of this trip. NORX stands for Northern Indiana Public Service Company. They currently are mainly a power generating company. They only roster about one engine, NORX 3470 and SW600. We would then see another train sneaking up on us again, solving yet another meet. Along with, here comes the DPU, the Union Pacific GVO. Coming up alongside is an oil train led by CN Power. This train is most likely led by two soon-to-be rebuilt power, a CN SD70M or SD75I, or SD75I, sorry, and a Dash 9, both of which are active rebuilding on CN's roster. Honestly thought for a second that second engine was one of the C449WLs, which I've been trying to catch for almost a year now. This reminded me of one of the oil trains we saw a couple months ago. That one having all Canadian Pacific power. However, it had Southern Railway hoppers as the buffer cars. This one also having at least one Southern Railway hopper car as the buffer car. I believe this train was carrying ethanol, along with the next train that would come up heading the same direction. This one having all Norfolk Southern power. This train was led by your standard Norfolk Southern power, being a ES44AC and a C6M. This train ending and it almost being lunchtime, we'll break off and end up going to a different spot. This spot being a place called Martin's Grocery Store, which we featured on the channel before. However, while we're heading over there, we would then see something that we were mainly looking for today. This one being the elusive Norfolk Southern B23, a local that runs between Goshen and Elkhart every day, well, weekdays, with a caboose on it as a shoving platform. That red caboose is really aging quite well and has a lot of graffiti on it. Now we're at Martin's. This place is an awesome place to get some pretty good lighting shots at most hours of the day. Our very first train would be a rather short intermodal. I noticed that most of this train were JB Hunt FedEx containers. However, there was a couple other brands on there, like Matson. This reminds me of an intermodal we seen in November of 24. It was only around 16 cars long. We would see this intermodal a little later in the video. We would then see the next train, which would be a manifest led by a Banasev Jivo, which had some graffiti on it. course, this wouldn't be a Norfolk Southern train if it didn't have an AC-44 C6M leading per second, along with another Dash 9. This train had a decent consist, consisting of an old Southern Pacific autorack, an old Burlington Northern autorack, and a plain white autorack. There would be another intermodal that would pass this, which I wouldn't be able to catch because I was sitting in the car warming up. However, there was a GPU on this train, which was another BNSF Chivo, also with some brand new trash gondolas or trash container cars. Also, that's a cool little yellow autorack. Really don't see the second one. After that train would pass, we would then see another manifest. This time, having all Norfolk Southern power, would be coming eastbound. I believe this train went into Norfolk Southern Elkhart Yard, just judging on what track it's on and how slow it's going. This one was coming out of the yard. This train would have an AC-44 C6M, along with another AC-44 C6M, along with a couple Wisconsin Central boxcars, 3 to be exact, along with a Chivo GPU. There was also that car. I have no idea what railroad it's from. If you can figure it out, tell me in the comments below. After this train passed, we would head to a store called Michael's Trains, where I would pick up a hopper for the layout. You'll see the hopper here in just a second, but the DPU's got to pass first. Michael's Trains, located in Goshen, Indiana, has quite a bit of selection. There's what I got, a Sioux Line hopper. We would then head to the west end of the Elkhart Yard. Or the other side, I'm not sure which direction it is. Where you would see that Chivo / C6M train once again on the other side. Sorry, Chivo / Dash 9. I know it's the same train because it was quite short and it had a whole bunch of those FedEx containers. We would end up driving along the yard most of the way, then turning around again to see what we could see, because there was still some trains moving out and about through the yard. This one being one of them. I wasn't expecting everything that we saw in the yard, though. We saw, well, I won't spoil it, but the least exciting thing that we saw was probably the BNSF/CN Chivos sitting out in the yard. Here comes the end of the train, where we would soon begin rolling along the absolutely massive Elkhart yard. To start out, we see a rebuild pair with the weird radiators. Along with a slug. Oh, well, there goes most of our view. Anyway, we have another train. This one, I believe, was a train that passed behind that manifest that we saw at Martin's. After this train would pass, I hope we get to see some other stuff. Behind there was a BNSF CN duo mentioned earlier. We'll see that a little later again. Sitting behind there appeared to be a whole line of engines, which we'll once again see later. What I could tell underneath it, it was a whole bunch of 4-axle, most likely Jeeps, and probably a few slugs mixed in there. I had no idea if they were moving about the yard or what. There you can see also some other things around the back of the yard. And this train should be clearing up. Yeah, there it goes. There we can see a SD40 and an SD40E set, and, oh, Operation Lifesaver, along with a slug. I've not seen a Norfolk Southern slug on Norfolk Southern tracks before, because the only ones I've seen were on Great Lakes Central. Or, sorry, Lake State. I also can see back there some cars on top of flat cars. Pretty interesting. One of them was a trash gondola, and one was a tank car. Oh, well, we got another train again. This one basically came out of nowhere. Thankfully, it wasn't going as fast, so we were able to get ahead of it. This one had C6M and GEVO. Now we get to see the other end of the yard, and what was not blocked, or what was blocked by the other intermodal. Here we come up again on the broken rolling stock at the end of this line here, along with a few potash hoppers, an old R box or T box or whatever. And a whole variety of older equipment, hoppers, center beam, tank car, former CNW hopper. Then, coming up, we would see the OCS and slug set once again. I was surprised to see that. I knew it went into the yard. I didn't know it was still in the yard. It ran the local for a few days, and then it basically got put into the line again. There you can see the gondola and tank car. You also can see an SD40 duo running back from the hump yard. There is the OCS along with the slug once again. We also come up on a SD40 and some other locomotive duo, I'm not sure what. We then would come up on yet another duo of locomotives. This one being a SD40 and a high hood GP38 online. That's awesome. I'm pretty sure those are yard units because I couldn't find any reports of them from a long time. I also see a train moving in the distance, and yet another high hood connected to a slug, a couple slugs, another slug, a jeep, another slug, and a Dash 9. I have no idea what that duo or what's doing there, but I guess it's storage. We also see that BNSF/CN duo, and also we once again see the that one train with 3 Sioux Line hoppers, a few old Pac-Man, and a variety of auto racks. Most likely going to be shoved over the hump yard or flat switching or something with one of those weird rebuilt radiator Jeeps. We then would have to rush to catch up to that intermodal up there. We were trying to find a different spot that wasn't along the yard, so we found a Dollar General parking lot we could sit in. Intermodal was a little longer than I thought it would be. However, it was going decently slow because it was basically following another one. So I was honestly just surprised to see those Sealand intermodal cars because you usually don't see those on Norfolk Southern. I think that's the first time I've seen them at Norfolk Southern. The only other time was a couple CSX intermodals. After a few minutes, the train would finally pass, and after a long wait, we would then see another train, which I believe was the train that was running in the back of the yard when we were going past it for the second time. This train had an AC-44 C6M leading, and one thing I noticed about the crossing here is that there is no bells. Quite interesting, but I don't think you're going to go around too easy because there's a pretty large median in between the two sides of the road. So you would have to do a pretty weird maneuver to get around that. This train would also have a C6M DPU as well, which we'll see a little later. I must say, that had to have been one of the most fouled horns I've ever heard. I honestly kind of liked it though, because it kind of had a little two-tone action there. There wasn't too many incredibly interesting cars on this train. However, toward the end, there would be a Southern Pacific cushion boxcar. With this train being done, we would finally pass the yard one more time just to see if there was anything else on its way through. Spoilers, there really wasn't. Except, of course, when the camera turns off and you're kind of far from the tracks and you hear a horn, and then you see a Canadian Pacific C6 AC-44 CW and a Grey Ghost. So yeah, that was kind of a bummer, but really can't always catch everything. Also, kind of interesting was some of those auto racks with basically no panels on them. Thought that was quite interesting. I'm pretty sure one of those high hoods, that high hood online, or a GP60 and another engine, or something, moved around to the back and was kind of working back there. Sadly, that high hood line with all those slugs in it and the Dash 9 were kind of blocked by this whole train there and hodgepodge. I've no idea where the other slugs that went, or high hood and ST40 went. My guess is probably farther in the yard to go break apart another train. But I guess we'll never know. However, one nice thing is the hopper, or the gondola, and the tank car were still on the flat cars in the back, and the OCS was still in sight along the road, along with a few old hoppers that I didn't notice before. Now we're at night. You can see there's 3001 again. We're back at the station waiting for Amtrak. However, before Amtrak, there's a train sitting down there along with another train on its way to shortly come by. Wouldn't take long before this train would be close and would slowly come rolling toward us with yet again standard Norfolk Southern power. This train would be yet another oil train heading to Chicago, most likely heading to some port along the East Coast. Now, had an AC-44 C6M and a Gevo. funny thing was, is I pranked one of my friends, my close friends, at Gone Fishing 87 into thinking that I saw 4014. Well, I technically did, because that lead engine was 4014. But, yeah, that was kind of funny. After this train left, the other freight train, which I'm pretty sure was that grain train that we saw earlier, or whatever aggregate that was, what we saw earlier, left. And Amtrak, the Floridian, was coming back to Chicago with the same power that we had saw earlier. And just a reminder of what that power was. It was a P42 DC along with an ALC 42. With Amtrak now on its way, we would once again take one final look at all the equipment at the museum, as the last train at Elkhart Station would finally come into view. However, don't click off yet, because there's two more things that I still have yet to show. I would almost say Amtrak is either close second or equal to NS's foul horns. Surprisingly, he only stopped for probably a minute and a half before he would finally leave after letting around 2 people get off. It wouldn't be too long before Amtrak would sound off and head in toward Florida. I remembered something the next day after this train had gone by, and it was light once again, that there was an engine, or, well, in some cases two, from the Elkhart and Western Railroad sitting in downtown Elkhart. Elkhart and Western mainly specializes in storing cars and only has around 5 engines. I wasn't expecting that this awesome looking locomotive was sitting there, supporting the Veterans and Troops unit. The Patriot Rail logo is also on the side, which is awesome. I took some really good pictures of this thing. Also behind it was an old Norfolk Southern caboose. I have no idea what year it was from, but my guess is it's probably from maybe a Conrail road. For anybody wondering what kind of diesel this is a GP8, a rebuilt GP9, originally from the Garden, or the Illinois Central. For the last train of the video, we would see a Canadian National train in Schoolcraft, Michigan. Not too far from the Grand Elk and Cian Diamonds. This train was a mixed auto-rack / intermodal. And while this train is passing, I would like to thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers again. I really hope by 2025, or the end of 2025, I'll get to at least halfway to 2,000. Also, Ask Yourself by the JTR Gaming channel. Links in my description. Is that we'll be posting a video really short soon on either Railroader or Roblox. So yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching and subscribing to the channel. And thank you guys for 2 years on YouTube.